The stacks on her mind, grinding all day, hustle refined, chatter and ceiling, she's fierce and untamed. Wealth is her title, wealth is her game. Power in heels or sneakers on deck. Respect comes easy when you earn that check. From boardroom to businesses, she's got finesse. This woman right here, built for success. She's a bad bitch, and she signs checks. Built her own throne, what you expect? Dreaming real big, no limit, no stress. She's a bad bitch, and she signs checks. Oh, money moves, yeah, she runs the show. Hired in Queens, now let her know.
I thought Stamina was the perfect song to bring in for this podcast because every lawyer needs it, right? If they plan to stay in the legal industry a while, I know we've talked in the past about burnout. It takes a lot to maintain a legal career, to own a practice, to keep up the energy, the stamina, to do all the things it means to lawyer and be a business owner as well. So if you plan on staying in the industry and making an impact, you need stamina, right? And speaking of stamina and speaking of impact, today's episode is actually all about securing your legacy, something that's actually often overlooked, even by high-earning professionals, lawyers, entrepreneurs, business owners. So many of you have worked so hard to build your career and your wealth, but have you ever thought about what happens next? I know it's challenging. We were just joking about this, Emma and I, that nobody likes to talk about their impending death. That sounds like something you want to go home and chat about, right? But it's a conversation that needs to happen. So Emma's been jamming with me in the background here, and she's joining me to talk about succession planning, my apologies, and estate planning for lawyers. So she's actually focusing on helping so many lawyers who are looking at transitioning their firms from themselves to a new practitioner. So I'm really excited to have you on to talk about how lawyers can protect their wealth and their legacy, make sure that's intact. So Emma, thanks for jamming with me and welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Really appreciate it. I want to start off actually by talking about why succession planning really matters. And so tell me, like, why is this such a crucial part of a lawyer's career that they don't ever get around to?
Oh my goodness. I mean, listen, succession planning is important for everybody, right?
Yes.
Important
Yes,
for everybody, and especially business owners. When you get into business, what I say is what you really should be thinking about is what's your exit, right? We always want to make a cash flow. We want to create income for ourselves, but what is the end goal, right? And for me, for lawyers, I've had a couple of lawyers. I've taken over a couple of retiring lawyers' practices. I just merged with another firm, and it's astounding just how much work goes into building a practice. And, lawyers we just get so busy with our file work and just getting through files every day. And it's such a, it's a stressful job, right? It's almost like every day you're just getting ready to tackle your emails. And, you're not really thinking about what's the point of this all in the end, right? And, I practice estate planning in my own practice. And so even with my clients, what is the purpose of all the work that we do? And usually it's either one of three answers. It's going to be one, future quality of life. That's where the income comes in. Second is, building a legacy. Maybe you want to make an impact in your, whatever it is you're doing. You want to make an impact. And three is to leave something behind, right? And so we spend so much time building our practices. And at the end of the day, they're very unlike many other businesses out there, because most businesses are sellable. And I find that lawyers' businesses are particularly unsellable, right?
Ooh, really?
I wouldn't say unsellable, but they don't, if you don't plan well, it's not super easy to just have somebody be a successor lawyer of your practice, right? I mean, there are some lawyers that have practiced decades. They haven't recorded anything. They don't have proper client lists. They haven't, built a proper website, and you want somebody to come in and pay you top dollar for your decades of practice. And, if you haven't really done a lot to systematize and document it and provide some sort of succession strategy where you can bring somebody on and actually have them slowly then take over the practice, well, you could find yourself with, an unexpected event and just kind of decades of work just for nothing.
Wow. I mean, that's a very should give any lawyer pause is what I'm thinking, because you kind of talked about, firstly, why do people do what they do? Often they're just caught in the busyness of it, right? They become a lawyer and they're like, okay, I want to be a lawyer. I'm going to practice this area of law. And then they get caught in the busyness and they don't think beyond the first why, which is lifestyle. The other two whys, which was impact. Remind me of the third one.
So legacy, creating an impact, that's that. And the second one was, or the third one I should say, was leaving something behind.
Leaving something behind. So you got lifestyle, impact, and leaving something behind, for the next generation. So you want to make a difference. A lot of lawyers, I know that's a big thing, but beyond that, it's leaving something behind for others to keep going with what you've done, right? And again, it's hard to have these conversations because it's often people are getting caught in the busyness. And because they're kind of getting caught in the busyness, what I'm hearing is they're not necessarily leaving that trail behind, that they can leave something behind, which could be documentation. It could be how they've structured their business. So they're working really hard and, maybe they're making a big impact, but the leaving something behind is they get hit by a bus and then that's it, because they didn't really create that trail so that somebody could actually pick up what they've done and keep going with it is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, how many business owners sell their practices and they're leaving something behind for their family, for their future quality of life. And I just find that, with lawyers, it's so easy for us to just leave that by the wayside. And like I said, I've taken over a couple of lawyers' practices, and there have been, I think it's super important. It's super important succession strategies for lawyers, not just, and I'll tell you this, it's not just for you as a lawyer, but I feel like it's for the profession as well.
That's what I mean.
I started my own practice and it was so much work. Okay. It was so much work. And I thought to myself, this is crazy. We're all putting our names on the door. We're all putting all this work in. And then we just, an incident happens, something unexpected, or we just, that's gone, just gone like that. And then, younger lawyers need to come into the field, doing all that work all over again. And maybe, like larger firms, they have succession strategies, going for partner is, one type of, but for the smaller law firms, the solo practitioners, the mid-sized firms, what's the plan? What's the plan?
It's just, as you say that, it's like, so people are coming in, reinventing the wheel every single time a lawyer leaves, when they could just be carrying on that, as you said, leaving something behind, carrying on a practice and making it even easier to keep growing and making more of an impact. It sounds like it's something that lawyers aren't necessarily putting a lot of time in, but as soon as something happens, and often things never happen when you plan them to, right? So you get hit by a bus, like what I see is somebody having a heart attack, all of a sudden they're gone. And as you said, there's no way to value their practice for the people, maybe their loved ones initially, that they just want to pass on, that asset to. So they're not getting what they think they're going to get, because there's no real way for someone to come in and keep going.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, right? So, my initial response was kind of, what about, how does this affect you and your kind of ambitions when you created the law firm? But then there's the other thing, and then the second point I made was, well, it's helping the profession. And I find that, like seasoned lawyers have so much to offer in terms of experience, right? And that's valuable. And so how can we capitalize on that to not only capitalize on it financially, but also to help our profession? And then you got to think about what about clients, right? I mean, we have an obligation to our clients. And if something happens, I mean, the many different ways that we can affect our clients' lives is really just without end. And we owe it to our clients on top of, owing it to our own hard sweat, and hard work. We owe it to our clients, right? Which is really why the Law Society has mandated that we have to have a succession plan this year, starting 2025. It's mandatory. So we all need to get into it.
Well, we'll talk a little bit more about that. So if people don't recognize how crucial having a succession plan, because it's something that, sometimes I think, and I see it in my own business in the financial industry as well. It's something I think people are like, something we'll think about later, maybe further down the road when, I'm a little bit older. When should people be thinking about succession planning? Because it's easy to get caught in the busyness and say, yeah, someday we're going to get all this stuff done.
Now.
And clearly it's going to impact our IP, like all of the hard work and all of the value we've brought to law and what we've brought to the profession. It's going to impact that value of our business even. So yes, it's something I'm going to think about later, but when should we really start thinking about it?
So, here, I say right now, and I think that it should be a yearly thing that we dedicate to. We take time to do our taxes. That's a great time to sit and think, okay, well, you're doing financial planning at, especially in certain times of the year and before year end, and what kind of corporate strategies can we do? That's a great time to say, well, we need to have, I need to take time for my estate plan, right? And so I started my own practice. It's been many years. It's 14 years now. And, I started like many other people. I started, on my own, and I just kind of getting everything, you just kind of build, Right. And as you go forward and you start learning kind of what makes a company valuable, sellable, right? What would a buyer kind of look for in a business? And you realize, oh my gosh, there's so many things I should have done at the beginning. I should have started taking, X type of data, or, systematizing certain things, or whatever it is, right? You should always start at the beginning. And so, as a culture these days, we're all about creating goals and visions and manifesting. Right. What do we do when we manifest, right? We're thinking of the future. What is the end goal? And we think about it now, to it drives us to that. Right. And, so, right now is the time. Okay. For anybody, I think that you should make it a yearly thing. I think that, and I think just kind of like changing the mindset, right, of not thinking of this negatively. Like I tell this to my clients that are parents. If you're a parent and you have a minor and you don't have an estate plan or a will, it's quite frankly, it's irresponsible. It's irresponsible because you chose to bring a dependent into this world. You made that decision, just like we choose to build our practices and to start, whatever it is that we're starting. So if we do that, then we have an obligation to think about what kind of mess could we leave behind? And, because it's so much easier to just think about yourself first, realistically it is. And so you think about it, I will say, what happens if you got in an accident tomorrow? Like if you got in an accident, forget about dying, because most people are like, I don't care, right? I'm gone, right? So if we could change that selfish mentality, because it is a little selfish, if we could change that in our culture, that would be great. But the other thing is, well, what if you're not gone? What if you're not gone and you're just incapacitated? And now it's like, what kind of a quality of life are you really going to live? Because you didn't think about it. And, I've had a couple of very close people die suddenly on me. And all it takes is one of these moments in life to realize how fragile your life is.
That's it.
And to think like, what are you doing it for? If you have no thought about that future potentiality.
And it just kind of brings up that it's such a blind spot, because going back to our mortality, we could die, but we could also get sick. And then we don't get to be the agents that we want to be of what our end goal is and what the future we want to create with our practice. And, all this impact that we might be making, maybe, you're a sharpshooter doing amazing things in law and people know your name, but your brand doesn't exist beyond you, is what I'm hearing. If you don't actually have everything documented, you don't actually have a vision for how someone would step into your practice and keep really that torch going, right? It's kind of like the Olympics, right? You keep passing the torch on to somebody else so that they can keep taking whatever it is you're doing further and further, is what I'm hearing. So what are some components that lawyers actually need to consider if they're starting to realize it's something I need to think about, not in the future, but now it's something I should be looking at yearly? What are some key components that they need to consider when they're putting a plan together?
Well, listen, the first thing is the immediate kind of emergency stuff, right?
Right.
If I get sick tomorrow, who is going to be the person or the people that are going to step into my shoes? Okay. So that's number one. And of course,
that's a tough one.
It's a huge one, right? And this is where we kind of need to build alliances and, talk about that more as a profession. And especially, I mean, obviously in the bigger firms, this is not so much of an issue, right? But among the solo practitioners and the smaller firms, it's super, super important to think about. So who? And maybe it's kind of partners within the firm, and that's great. But if you're a solo, who? Okay, and that's number one question. And then the second, I really would be like, how? Okay, and that kind of leads you to start thinking about your processes on a daily basis at your office. How do you document things? How often do you update files? If something were to happen, would it be easy for somebody to step in? Do you have a summary of, how how your IT is structured to how your files are organized, and, so that somebody could jump in and deal with that. Of course, there's like money considerations. Okay. Financially, if I'm incapacitated, which is a bigger one, what do I have in place to not only have my, income generating business continue, but make sure that my quality of life is still preserved. And then you have to, and then we start thinking about extra things, right? So that's kind of the immediate emergency planning, what happens if, and then, the next thing is, well, how can I maximize my business value going forward, knowing that one day I'm going to retire, right? And so I went out to lunch with a lawyer in the summertime, and he was retiring. He had already given his notice. Everything was shutting down in a couple of months, and we toyed with the idea of taking over his office, but the no website, no client list, nothing documented properly, a million filing cabinets worth of paper, and it's just kind of more of a liability than anything. So, unfortunately, decades of practice just shutting down the doors and paying for storage for those files until, it comes time to get rid of them. So, we don't want to be that. And, how there's a million different ways to do that. You can start with an office manual, right?
With what? With an office
manual.
Okay.
How many lawyers have office manuals?
I think all those things overwhelm people, and they kind of go, let's do that later. We've got this great file to work on. Let's go focus on that. Right?
I know. And it's hard when you're a solo practitioner, because you don't have the time.
Yeah.
You don't have the time.
But it's kind of like this endless cycle. You don't have the time, so you keep doing the same thing. So then you never get to it. And then you're never able to actually you basically get the value of your firm when you're ready to sell it, retire, or, God forbid you passed away, right? You get that blind spot we're talking about, or get sick. So you never are able to access all the value because you don't get to it. So it's just, it's just.
It's the cycle of being a lawyer, but that's being a lawyer. Every day it's a battle against your email box. Okay. Right. And you're scheduling.
Right.
But like I said, I think it takes taking one day a year, at least one day a year, and sitting down, maybe it's a Saturday, right? And dealing with your estate plan.
Well, I guess my other question would be, if you're somebody that recognizes that you need a successor, how do you because there's so many parts to this that I could see overwhelming people. Okay, I need to find a successor. So keeping my eye out. How do I start that? How do I start putting these manuals in place? Staff, having that communication plan. I think all of these things might lead people to go, yeah, that's a lot. And as you said, it's a race against your inbox. So, let's talk about are there resources for people who might need these things talked through? What do you suggest as a first step?
Well, you can always just contact me directly, and I'd love to chat with anybody that needs help getting there.
Okay. We'll definitely even talk a bit more about that, even as a first step of even, putting all of this together, even on before they even get to you, so that you can kind of start to organize.
Yeah. No. Okay. So, I guess one is, okay, the who. Okay. And if you don't have a who, then we need to start networking.
Yeah.
You need to start networking. And of course, you're always going to want somebody that has the same type of practice, and that of course shares your values and your style. So, networking as much as possible, I think, is number one if you don't have somebody already. And because this mandatory requirements come in with the Law Society, it's more reason for, us to talk as professionals together and just kind of make alliances. Okay.
Yeah, there's a young professionals network too, right? Like they have events. I know OBA has events all the time for young lawyers who are looking for mentors, who are looking to make these kinds of connections. So definitely don't get stuck in front of your computer and stuck in front of your inbox and into the business. Get out there and mingle and meet people and start putting it out there that you're looking for a success, or even just making those connections, because sometimes just making those connections will lead you there.
And it's a great opportunity because, we talk about the graying of the bar, right? And so we have new lawyers that are coming out. We have, and all of us existing lawyers that are now subject to this mandatory requirement. And we have lawyers that, are maybe thinking about retirement now. And so it's a great opportunity for us to kind of see our needs, our mutual needs, and build those relationships together. And you're right. There's a solo and small firm event by the Law Society every year. All types of stuff. So yeah. And if you're in a particular niche area, then of course you kind of want to find somebody in that niche. And, I like thinking about this collaboration more than this idea that we're all competing against each other. So I like the idea that maybe this will kind of increase our collaboration as professionals together.
I love that. I call it co-opetition. So we're all trying to find clients, but we can actually collaborate and you get further. And I just love that breakdown of figuring out the value of your practice and, figuring out what your strategy is. Like there's a really great book out there by Dan Sullivan called Who Not How, which kind of talks about who's the who versus doing everything yourself. Because I think that's probably the trap we get into, that we feel like I alone, we can do everything. And just even thinking about your client communication, the documentation, and say, love all of these elements that help us to think about the succession piece. Now, what about on the estate planning piece? What are people needing to think about that goes really beyond the will if you're a business owner?
Yeah, I mean, with estate planning, there's all types of just kind of financial and tax considerations, right? I mean, tax planning to, you're really just protecting your estate, whether it's maximizing so that we're not spending too much on taxes or legal fees, or, having double wills is pretty standard for anybody that has a corporation, a professional corporation, for us lawyers. And whether you want to build trusts and whatnot, like everybody's family structures are different. And so, like you talk about this all the time, right? Estate planning is just central to everybody's life, whether we're lawyers or not.
That's right.
So of course, all the same financial considerations that anybody else would think about, we should put our mind to. And this also goes back to why now is the time to start. I always tell my clients, like, the time of acquisition of an asset is the time that you think about the end, right? Because sometimes you don't have time to go back in time and tax plan. So, maximizing the value of your business, minimizing the taxes, minimizing, legal fees if you had to have somebody else administer and whatnot, all big considerations. But so the one is who we talked about, building alliances. Right. And the second thing I would say, everybody should start digitizing now. If you didn't get the memo during COVID,
lots of them did not. Lots of lawyers didn't.
Practice, okay. Some very basic things you could do is, focus on getting a digitizing, plan going now. Or
hiring somebody if need be, right? Like it could be even a summer student to come in and just kind of help you digitize, like work with them, monitor them.
Absolutely.
Because it doesn't have to, again, who, not how. It doesn't have to be you, right?
I'm not saying that I'm doing this all, myself either, right? So I'll give you an example. I hired somebody to just scan all day, every day, because I had taken over a couple of lawyers' practices who had tons of paper all day, every day, just scanning. Okay. I actually hired a company to do our operations manually. Yeah. Okay. But you could just start small, and who, not how. So, if you have a clerk or if you have a, receptionist, okay, make a to-do guide, due in 2 weeks on, how do we open the practice, close the, some basics of how we open a file, what's our tickler system, and just summarize it in a document. Okay.
Yeah. And it could be, I love that. I actually love that idea because it means, again, and you can put deadlines on it, right? So the communication plan that we just talked about, these are all the different things that you want, your wish list of all the pieces you want communicated, work with someone, put the wish list together with deadlines. So it's not you doing the grunt work, which I think is what keeps, who you are, those lawyers buried under files, paper files, that's how they end up staying there, never to be found again.
Oh my goodness. Well, everybody that does something, have them do the summary. So if you have an IT guy, IT person, have them do a summary of what is your setup. If they drop dead tomorrow and you need another IT person to come in, what's the setup? Where are we getting access to, whatever it is, the admin access to all types of IT stuff, right? IT guys really don't want to, IT people don't really want to give us that information, but we have to have it and you have to think about it. Okay, so you have the IT personnel is doing the summary of the IT stuff. You got your receptionist doing a summary of that. Maybe you have a clerk that has a summary, summarize how we run a file, how you read my notes, like where can you find certain things, like whatever it is, it might be. Just think about it as you practice and have somebody else.
Think of every single person in your practice that's doing something, get them to do a summary of what they do. And here's your uncle, Bob's your uncle trying to build out your communication plan and your manual. So I love all of that. Now, I'm sure doing what you do for the last 14 years, you've seen a lot of things go wrong. So tell me a little bit about some of the mistakes you've seen lawyers make when it comes to their succession and their estate plan.
Well, really, it's just not having an estate plan at all, right? I've seen fiascos where we have real estate closings and something happens to a lawyer. There's no plan in place. You got to get the trustees, the law society to get involved. Never mind the fact that there's just no value to that practice now. Now there's costs to the estate because you got to figure it out. And you got to somehow wind down all these files and have them transfer. You got to cooperate with the law society to some degree. Who's doing that? And so that's kind of just one mistake. The second,
getting a headache hearing about that one, just as you mentioned.
Yeah, it's crazy. The second thing is just really not documenting things so that you don't have an optimal sellable business. And that, then the next is just not seeking out a successor, right? And waiting for it to be too late, just being too in the same routine of going to the office, going home, going to the office, going home, and then just not having anybody, not even a candidate available, so that the moment that you want to even think about it, that it can become a reality. And I think you see more on the financial planning side, all the different things that we as lawyers could do to be more financially prepared.
Now, taxes are a big one. People often don't think, well, if I have a corporation or, I've built up assets in a corporation and now I'm going to leave my business, how am I going to get the money out?
Yeah.
How am I going to pass it on? Maybe I have a child or whoever has decided that they're going to come in and be a lawyer as well, right? And take over how's that going to work, right? So thinking through all those, and as you said, having those conversations.
Exactly. And, do you need life insurance? And what kind of insurance are you going to provide to a successor so that you're not leaving a ton of mess? Like you got to make it desirable, right? I don't want to take over a practice that's just going to cause me a huge headache. That's not the point here. It's supposed to be a win-win. So, yeah.
Amazing. Honestly, that's some amazing insights because I think, again, there's lots of lawyers out there buried under paper. And even more important than that, a lot of what we're talking about is really known in a lot of business circles as your IP, your intellectual property. Mm-hmm. So if you have been building up in your firm all these cases you've done, all this work you've done, how you do things, that's so much more unique and valuable than how another lawyer does things. That's your IP. That's your intellectual property. That has a value, but only if you document it. We knew.
So one of the projects that we have going on in our firm right now is the video library. Okay. I want to capture everything on video, and especially seasoned lawyers that have so much. And us lawyers, we love talking, right? We love talking and we love all our stories. And it's like, hey, why don't you just story tell on camera? Okay. Because all these stories, one after another, or just kind of practice tips are so valuable. And what does it take to have a phone and just do a little video and just start accumulating all of your IP really that you've earned, throughout the years. So just little things like that you can do right now to make your business more valuable. And hey, you know what? Even just these things like the manuals, maybe you just want to write videos as a really simple solution right now, like video and say, if something were to happen to me here, this is an explanation of how I run something or how we organize this and how we organize that. And at least you have something that's there, right?
I love it. Tangible things you can do so that you don't, like someone coming into your practice, a young buck wanting to buy your practice doesn't get, doesn't end up choking on all of the dust on your files.
Yeah.
They actually have, you described video libraries, a manual that they can look at. I love that. Are there any other actionable steps you think lawyers, people who are trying to do what you talked about in the beginning, which is have a lifestyle for themselves, but then create an impact, which I know so many lawyers want to do, but finally, like what we talked about, which is around leaving that trail, blazing a trail, creating that IP, creating value that goes beyond them, that someone else can keep growing and improving on. What are steps they can take to start doing that? I think the video library was one, but any others that you'd recommend?
The library, just the first one, simply setting aside a day to do it, making it a yearly effort, reviewing a list of potential candidates and not stopping until you feel comfortable knowing that you have a few or a successor available to you. Documenting procedures, whether it's video or whether it's paper, documenting your client database. So data these days is everything, right?
Yeah,
and
how many in the AI world?
Yeah. And how many law firms, have a CRM, client relationship manager, right? You hardly. It might be something that's worth thinking about, that every time you have a contact that you put it into this platform that could be valuable, and for those people that don't know, it's kind of a marketing platform where, you input data on the people that, your clients or your leads, and you have their information. And if you want to do a mailing list or things like that, then it's really easy to do that and also pull stats of your business. So, I don't want to overwhelm. I feel like I'm overwhelming here.
No, I think this, if people take one or two things and they run with it, like to me, it's about that incremental growth, incremental development. So if you're taking even one step, to get your business off of paper or out of your head, probably more like it. So whatever you can do to take that next step, to take your business out of your head, show your value, the value you've built in your business. And, as I said, just really improve and increase the intellectual property that you've brought to your practice. Anything you can do on that level, Emma, I think all the suggestions have been so amazing. And I really want to say thank you for such an insightful conversation and for sharing all this expertise. And obviously, people need to talk to you. Maybe that's probably the best thing, is for them to just talk to you about their circumstances. Maybe if they can't get it out of their head on their own, they need to talk to someone. So where can listeners connect with you if they want to learn more?
Yeah, great. Listen, first of all, thank you so much, Jackie. You're always so insightful, and I love your podcast. And so I'm super grateful to be here. And if people want to get in touch with me, they can email me at emma@ionlaw.ca. And Ion is AION. Law.ca, or call me. I'm always up for a phone call, email. Our phone number is 1-866-ION-LAW. So 1-866-246-6529. And we actually have a receptionist that answers the phone, and you can just simply ask for me. I'm always open to either helping or just chatting with other lawyers, because I'm certainly passionate about it.
I just love the fact that you're modernizing the way law is being done, because probably some of those gray hairs. I know I went from the typewriter myself as a Gen Xer to where we are now with ChatGPT. So there's lots of people who are, maybe on the grayer side who are struggling to embrace technology, but understand why succession planning is so important. So thank you again for all of you who didn't get a chance to write down all of Emma's information. Don't worry, we've got you. We're going to have all of her information available in our show notes. So thank you again, all of our listeners. We really appreciate you. Whatever you can do, don't wait to secure your legacy. I think, if anything, you highlighted that to us today, Emma. So please take action today. And if you've enjoyed this episode, please make sure to subscribe, leave a review, and of course, share it with someone who you think could need to hear this. I'm sure a lot of people listening who know lawyers, potentially on the grayer side, could use this information. So until next time, Confidant community, I really want to thank you so much for listening to this podcast. And if you are also ready to have a conversation with us on the financial side around your succession plan, and you're not sure where to start, please feel free to reach out to us. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and all of our social media channels for all the latest updates. As always, stay informed, stay empowered, and join us next time on the High Earning Woman podcast. See you soon. Bye, everybody. And thank you again, Emma.
Thank you.